Good evening, everyone. My name is Brenda Ahlberg, Kenai Peninsula Borough Information Officer, and tonight we are going to provide you another update. As we are in our community conversation, we welcome your questions and appreciate those that have contributed today. And with me tonight is Dan Nelson, our incident commander, who's taken time to join us again tonight for those questions and an update. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Good evening, everybody. Welcome and welcome back to a little bit more technology cooperating for tonight. We're back to a regular setup, so hope you enjoy that. So I'll run right into an update, and then we can go forward with some questions that were submitted, and as you submit them in the comments. So just a little bit of an update on today's activities in your borough. So we focused a lot on starting to pivot our conversations internally through some of our teams to the long-term impacts and recovery. And what we mean by that is, even though we're in the middle of a response, we're still working on things that are developing daily. We're thinking about that long-term impact of this situation and the recovery pieces of that. So that conversation has just started, not too much to say, but it is something that I wanted to let people know that we're looking not only with what's happening here and in the next few days, but down the road. In the borough, we did some internal work with some protocols for our employees. We did some additional training for our management and supervisory staff on those various protocols and cleaning, disinfecting, physical distancing. It was a good reminder for all of us. That relates to a potential exposure we had with a borough employee. You can read a little bit about that on our news release that was put out, but we had a potential exposure related to an employee that works in our solid waste department. That employee did not have public contact, so it's not of concern to the public, but we reinforced those protocols, and the correct things were done, where the person self-isolated and is in, looks like they're getting to be in relatively good health here after that. So please let everybody know that, but with no public contact, it's just for your information as the public. In addition, some of the other protocols have been put into place for the safety of our employees and for the safety of the public is with our appraisal teams from our borough assessing department. Those folks are still out and about doing their work that they need to do. However, be aware that our appraisers who are currently working in the Nikiski area are not doing any contact with people. They're not going into any residents' homes. If they're not handing out any paperwork or going to the door. So we're doing those assessments from the roads for safety, so we don't disturb people that are at home or have any risk of contact. So be aware of that. You can always identify our appraisers. They're always in vests. They have marked vehicles with borough identification. You can feel free to check. But those folks will be working from the road. If there's any follow-up that they need to do on any particular property that might involve going inside or talking with the resident, they'll flag that and get back to that at a later time. Finally, one last update for today is we do have an additional case on the Kenai Peninsula that was listed in Homer. That person, it was a travel-related case. And we do have additional information from the City of Homer and South Peninsula Hospital on the blog at kpboem.com. We've also posted here on our Facebook page, but I want to really make clear that CDC guidelines with how they attribute cases is based on where people are from. This case is listed in Homer. However, the person traveled to Anchorage, was tested in Anchorage, and did not come down to the Kenai Peninsula. They have been isolated in the Anchorage area. So I want to make that clear to folks that we do, if you look on our statistics, we do officially have a case in Homer. However, that person was not actually down in the Kenai Peninsula. So that's your update for today, a real brief recap of the activities throughout the peninsula as it relates to COVID-19, and just a real brief summary. So I think we can probably go into some questions here. Brenda?
Absolutely. One of the questions that was asked is, why are we reporting about solid waste? Why is that so important? And of course, we know that's critical services. Can you expound a little bit on that?
Of course, and like we say, we don't believe there was any public contact based on this, the investigation that we took place with the employee, but it's something that it's important to know, and it's important for us to know that there are potential exposures with public facilities. We want people to rest assured that especially our solid waste facility that's still open is taking those necessary precautions and is maintaining safety for the public. So you notice that you don't get the plastic card anymore that you hand back and forth, and other changes. So Mayor Pierce has encouraged all of us, and that was part of our training today, to make sure that those common spaces in our areas, like break rooms and those types of things, that we're not crowding people in there, that we're making sure to maintain that physical distancing, that at least 6-foot distance. So we do want to let people know, because we let our internal employees and team know. We will also let the public know, but just at a very high level. And again, we're not going to get into too many details of this for the employees' privacy and protection. We wish them well, and I know they're on the way to recovery, I do believe. So we'll leave it at that for tonight.
Thank you for that clarification. I think that's very important to let folks know that we are not going to be announcing cases or possible exposures throughout our borough facilities. We want to respect our employees' privacies, but there will come times such as this with critical services that we want to reassure the public that we are doing our due diligence and informing them as appropriate. So, but on the flip side, I want to remind our employees, or reassure our employees, that we are not going to be releasing this on a regular basis by any means, and don't want to set that expectation. Moving on with some additional questions for you. One of the questions that was brought up was with regards to the, excuse me, as I lost my chain here. What is the best source of, or what is the best way to get information if you're wanting to help, and how do they go about doing so?
And that's a great question, and I love this question. As a community, we're primed to want to help each other. So the first thing that I'll address that question in a basis of our planning and our preparation, is that we have been thinking about what these people have reached out to us, and businesses, and it's just been a wonderful thing that we've been taking many calls a day here at the Office of Emergency Management. I know the cities have been doing the same for people that are volunteering to help in some way. Right now, we have not put out a call for any type of volunteers or any specific supplies, as you may have seen in other areas. The need isn't there at this time. We continue to monitor it throughout the day, throughout the days to come. If we do have those issues, we'll absolutely let people know. But because of the social distancing and the physical distancing, right now, one of the best things that we want to do is make sure that people are staying inside, staying home, and keeping that physical distance. So that's part of the dynamic where it's a bit different than other emergencies, where there might be times that you can help affected people or other things. Right now, safety of everybody is paramount. Now, that being said, as I mentioned earlier in my update here at the beginning, we are looking at the long-term impacts for recovery. And I suspect, and we've been talking about some of those scenarios where that's going to be the time where we're going to need help. We're going to need volunteers and coordination and all of those types of services. So we're right now just kind of keeping a catalog of what's been volunteered to us so far. We haven't had any need for that. If there is a need and we can do it safely, we will put out that call publicly. But right now, we'd like people to focus on their own health, the health of their family, and expect that as these things flatten, as things start to stabilize, we get into the phase of the response of the recovery. It's likely that we will be putting out some calls and giving some volunteer opportunities. So thank you to everybody that has done that. Please stay tuned, and we will absolutely get that information out as soon as it becomes necessary.
One thing that folks could do is they could fill out a survey that's going on. Can you tell us a little bit about what the Kenai Peninsula Economic Development District is doing?
Absolutely. So Kenai Peninsula Economic Development District, quite a mouthful, has a survey, and that survey is open right now. It is open until the 27th at midnight, I believe, so Friday evening. And that, I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but it is a survey regarding some of the economic impacts of COVID-19, and they are trying to collect data to see what those impacts are and to start quantifying some of this. So that will relate, obviously, to the recovery piece that I just talked about. But if you would go and fill that survey out. And I will ask Brenda, who probably has it up, hopefully on her screen, if that was geared for business or individuals. Could you help me on this one? Sorry, I don't have it pulled up.
You're spot right. You were on right, or excuse me, spot on. And it is on our blog on today's post. The link is as well as the content. You click onto it. It talks about what type of business you have, what your sector of business it is, how many folks you employ, as well as how many folks you may employ during peak seasons, what kind of disruptions you've had during this COVID-19 incident, and also ask for additional questions. It's quite impressive. I know that that information is going to be, like you said, very good intel for recovery efforts here on the peninsula.
Absolutely. So that's a great thing to do from your home, or is to fill that survey out. And we may be asking for more of these things as more of our community partners and others start looking at this. But that's a great place to start. So don't forget, if you do have a business, please take the time to fill that out by Friday evening at midnight.
And with that, there is some additional things that we are working on that we have been able to get firmed up today. We're going to have a panel discussion this coming Friday. It is going to be the school district, you representing the borough and OEM, as well as our public health, our local public health facility. Can you share with us a little bit about what you envision and what we can do to prepare our individuals, or excuse me, our residents, and perhaps what kind of questions they may have for the panel as well on Friday?
Absolutely. We're excited for this, and hopefully we'll get some different insights and some ability to answer some questions from different viewpoints. So Department of Public Health, the Borough School District, as well as myself and Brenda will be on and being available to answer your questions. So think about those things. If you have specific questions related to schools, if you have specific medical questions that our public health folks can answer, go ahead and submit those. And I'm sure we will have a comment thread up on KPB Alerts that day to collect some of those questions. If you can get those in advance, it's a little bit easier to get to them. Otherwise, I'm sure we'll take some in the comment thread if we can keep up with it. I know that folks have been saying that scrolls pretty fast. I was seeing it yesterday and I don't usually see it. So submit those questions ahead of time. But remember that we will not talk for other agencies. We won't take their information that they're experts on. So we're hoping to have these folks and more guests on potentially in the future where they can talk to you directly as well. So I'll be sharing the camera, and Brenda and I will share the camera a little bit and be able to have a little bit of a panel discussion. So submit your questions on Facebook, and earlier in the day we'll get that posted, I think, for Friday. So Friday evening we're planning to do that. So I'm excited to have some company up here this evening.
All right, we've got a few questions that are coming in. We also know that at this time the governor is also on live, so we're a little bit on the quiet side, but we know that we're going to have an uptick probably after we're done. So we will be monitoring questions, as you said, and continue to provide appropriate responses. One of the questions that has come up is there consideration for potentially shutting down the Seward Sterling highways to local traffic returning only, and only opening to essential service vehicles? Is that being considered?
So right now, I have not been involved in any discussions like that, but I do want to address that that highway, so those Seward and Sterling highways are state highways, and by state law, that power would rest with the Department of Transportation and essentially the governor. So those powers rest with the state to enforce any type of checkpoint or other things that would involve local traffic. So at this point, if there isn't a mandate coming from the governor, I don't expect to see that happen. I haven't been in any discussions regarding that. We still, of course, want to make sure that the flow of commodities and commerce continue, but in a safe way. So we'll certainly get that message out, I think, if that changes, but I don't believe so right now.
Thank you. Another question has come up is, what is the criteria to be able to get tested if that need is, and is that need being met? And would not be remiss in saying it would be good to answer that question as best we can, and would also be a good topic for Friday. Can you address some of that?
And I was just thinking that as well, as public health would be here. That's a great time to ask that question. In general, as far as the need for testing right now, there still is the availability of tests. And I do want to clarify that when we talk about the availability of tests, there's tests here in the state, as well as tests at the labs that these samples are sent to. So a little bit of some things we learned this morning. As far as we talk about actual tests, kind of in quotes, there aren't physical tests that are being sent down here. They do rest with the state labs and with the private labs that are doing that processing. We send the samples. So you might have heard talk about the swabs that the municipality of Anchorage was looking for. That's what we use to take those samples, and then they are sent off. The hospitals that we've talked to on a daily basis, this morning we had this discussion, they reported they do have enough swabs to take those samples. However, as far as availability and as far as turnaround, obviously those labs are all significantly backed up. There's a lot of testing going on, and that's why your healthcare provider will screen you and your symptoms beforehand and potentially order other tests to rule out COVID-19 before go ahead and sending you for a test because of that delay in turnaround. So that's the information we've gotten so far. I would definitely let's put a pin in that, and we can definitely ask that question of public health on Friday evening. They may be able to give a bit more of a complete answer, but that was the answer from our discussions this morning.
That is certainly one of the reasons why we are hosting this panel on Friday, is because we are getting so many questions that we can't answer. We certainly don't want to repeat ourselves, or we want to make sure we value your time as a viewer as well. And so we appreciate any additional input you can give us between now and Friday. We will compile those questions and we'll make sure that we get answers to you as best we can. Another question that has come in is, are we likely to be hunkered down longer than 2 weeks? Is it realistic to think that we would be going longer?
And that's a tough question for me to answer, and not having, all of the health knowledge and knowing what public health and the Doctors Inc. and some of those folks at the state level might be a little bit more apt to be able to answer that with a bit more background. But from an emergency management perspective, we are supporting the protocols of trying to prevent the spread, of trying to stay indoors, making sure we're preventing the spread of this virus. And of course, in doing so, that makes sure that we are keeping our vulnerable population and others safe and healthy as best we can. So based on different things, and how many people are staying inside, and what exposures are, and all of those variables that are probably too complex to even be able to quantify. It's not unlikely that it would be more than 2 weeks. We've been talking about 2 weeks as the range of symptoms. So remember that 2 to 14 days is kind of the key time frame that we've been talking about, that somebody could be going around and not being symptomatic, but could still be spreading it. So I don't know exactly what some of the science and some of the public health aspects, the epidemiologists and those experts at the state level. Remember, the borough doesn't have health powers, so I don't have that subject matter expertise locally. But I think there is definitely some likelihood to that. It's not outside the realm of possibility. So I think that's another great question for Friday, if some of our public health folks might be able to weigh in on that and talk a little bit. So the key, though, just coming back to that, and we sound like a broken record, but it's critical. Stay inside. Stop preventing the spread of this virus is really going to be the key. And, essentially, the sooner we do that successfully, I think the sooner we're going to have some control on this.
Another question that has come up is about the schools, and are they going to be continuing on with their distance delivery of education next week? I know that is in the SIT report, that schools will be open on March 30th. That will be done through distance delivery. I'm reading this directly from the SIT report, and I know that our representatives from the school district are working very hard to ensure that is launched first thing Monday morning on March 30th. Wanted to share that with folks that also after school activities, athletics, and clubs are canceled.
And they, the school district really here and of course around the country have really been doing an all hands on deck push to do some of those things. And so I know that some of the things they've rolled out are based on age, and some ages may have some paper activities and other things where perhaps some of the older grades are using more of the online tools. I know there's planning and variability because we don't all have the same internet capabilities at our homes. There's just a lot going on to it. So very, very good job to the school district and all of the teachers and support staff that have been working towards that. I think we will have a representative, as Brenda says, on Friday, so we could get some particulars about that. But I'm sure for those folks that have students, the line of communication is open. Check those notifications and those tools on the school district website for a little bit more. So we'll talk about that, but I know it's been a spectacular effort by all.
All right, we've gotten a couple more questions about the Homer case and wanting to know if it is in Homer. And can you please bear another reiteration of that announcement for those who may have come in late to this broadcast?
Of course. So I covered this a little bit at the top, but just as a clarification for everybody, we have listed another case in Homer. However, the individual that is ill is from Homer, but they had been traveling in the lower 48. When they arrived in Anchorage, they'd self-reported, and they have been isolated in Anchorage, and they're going to continue to be there in Anchorage until they've been cleared by public health. So I want to clarify for everybody that that individual that's listed in the Homer case is listed as a Homer case because of CDC guidelines on how we report. They have to be reported as they're from there, but they have not been down to the Kenai Peninsula. They have been in Anchorage and will continue to quarantine in Anchorage until they are cleared. So it's a bit confusing the way things are reported, but that's the story there. A Homer resident that is in Anchorage and has not been down to Homer.
They did the right thing. They came in and were tested in Anchorage, and they are self-isolating in Anchorage. So we also appreciate their diligence in following protocols as well. I know that is hard for some folks to do that, but we do appreciate as folks are coming home from the lower 48 that they do follow this mandate and make sure that they immediately go into self-isolation for the 14-day requirement. Is there anything to add regarding that mandate as we see more and more snowbirds coming home?
Absolutely, and there is that link to that mandate is of course on our website at kpboem.com. There is the self-reporting that's required. I believe there is a presence at the airports to help people with that. But essentially, if you travel from out of state, if you come in from out of state, you need to self-quarantine. So basically the governor's order is to travel directly from the airport to your residence or to your lodging, whatever that is, and to remain there except to receive emergency medical care. So it's vital that we follow that, allow that 14 days to pass. So we know that you're not a carrier, have the virus that you may be spreading to others while not showing symptoms. And it is a tough thing. And I definitely want to underscore that officials at the federal, state, and local levels understand that this is a pretty disruptive thing to our way of life. It's something different, something we generally don't do. We don't stay in our homes for that long. We're active Alaskans that want to be out of doors, and temperatures getting warmer and the weather's getting better. So, and there are still ways to enjoy some of that. But if you have been traveling, if you are in one of those categories in that health mandate, make sure you are staying home and that you are isolating. There's some guidance for some folks that work in critical infrastructure included in that, but that guidance where that 14 days may not be required also has some additional steps to ensure you're continuing that physical and social distancing. So read that. That is linked on our website. You can get into that for more information. But the bottom line is, if you've been traveling from out of state, 14 days in your home. help us flatten this curve and prevent the spread.
And then lastly, I think it's a good way to close tonight, not only with answering this question that bears repeating, but I'll also ask you once again, with regards to the employee from the solid waste department, are any of the facilities going to be closed as a result of that? Can you share with us again for viewers that may not have heard your explanation?
Absolutely. So as we did have a potential exposure in the solid waste department, I want to reiterate that that employee and their supervisors did exactly what we asked them to do. They followed the guidance. They were able to isolate, talk to their healthcare provider, and follow the directions there, and things seem to be going well. We will not be making any changes to the solid waste facilities at this time. So as a reminder, solid waste the transfer sites are open, their normal hours. The Central Peninsula landfill outside of Solana is also open for its normal winter hours. And there are some modifications in place for employees and for the public to make sure we can maintain that physical distancing. We ask the public to be mindful of that as they are through and interacting with employees, that there will be some distance. You won't be passing things back and forth at this time. So just understand, we want to let people know that that happened. There is no risk or exposure to the public that we found in our investigation. And we want to make sure that we're taking our due diligence. But that's pretty much the end of the details that we can discuss. We really wish our employee well and our team member, and we know they'll be back once they're cleared from medical advice. But facilities remain open, solid waste services remain open. And on that same vein, remember, even though our facilities are physically closed to the public, all borough services are still continuing to be provisioned. So especially when we talk about our first responders, our public safety services, as well as general government things. So feel free to use our website. We have a lot of online tools out there that you can access. You can also pick up the phone during business hours, talk to one of our folks. They'll help you find whoever you need to conduct business with.
And I am going to just say a few closing words. I want to reach out to those who have volunteered to make phone calls and to spread the word about what we are about our updates and the resources available online. I just want to shout out to those who have made an effort to do that. For those individuals in our communities that do not have reliable internet or no internet. So I want to thank you that, and please continue to do so. Please continue to call your neighbors and let them know what's going on. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you for some closing words.
And thanks very much, Brenda, for helping us facilitate this tonight, as well as your team. And I want to follow on a little bit with what Brenda said, and I'm going to go back to something that I talked about earlier. Is we've had that question about volunteerism and how people can help. And right now, we know that being able to get out and be with people isn't something that we need to be doing. We need to be isolating, but that really doesn't prevent people from still doing some of those things. As we look towards recovery, as we look towards the future, it's very likely that there will be some community engagement, some volunteer opportunities, some things for us to be able to help each other and help our neighbors and help our communities. But as Brenda mentioned, as you are hopefully making some phone calls or passing things on to people that maybe aren't big internet users, they don't have the internet there, they're living in a place that doesn't have good access to technology, giving them a call, but also checking in with them. And I would encourage folks to check in, and sometimes that phone call or something along those lines just really does make somebody's day. And this is a hard thing, as we mentioned. I think probably all of us to some extent are feeling differently about what this physical isolation brings to us. But I encourage folks that we do live in a great time of technology. This is a great example. We've been learning how to video conference and really been successfully using it. So if you can do a video conference or a FaceTime or a Skype or whatever you'd like with somebody, please do that. I think that can make a big difference in spirits and maybe help relieve some of the anxiety and the stress that we are all feeling on different levels. And I'll extend that, of course, to doing that and with technology, not only for your local friends, but friends out of state. Maybe it's a great time to rekindle a connection. So let's keep each other's spirits up. Let's continue to work as a community and as Alaskans that we normally do. And we're going to be bringing you as much information as possible, that good information on our Facebook and our blog. So kpboem.com or KPB Alerts that you're watching us on. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us this evening. We have a great Wednesday night. And Brenda and I will be back tomorrow night at 7, and we sure hope you join us then. So have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.